During a recent school visit in a school that some would deem untraditional, students were asked about the type of student that wouldn't thrive in their space. One student said, "This is a weird school. At any moment, a musical number can break out in the hallway or karaoke can happen. To really love it here, you have to be okay with being all of you." What she was describing was joy. I've been thinking a lot about joy and specifically how joy shows up or doesn't show up in learning spaces. In this age of Black boy joy and Black girl magic, joy is no longer a feeling that's reserved for non school time. We have come to understand that when we lean into joy, belonging, identity, engagement, our academic success is exponentially increased. As we continue to take bold steps to invite students into work that matters and co-author pathways to help them determine their next best step, it's critical that joy is a part of the equation. A leading advocate for radical belonging and joyful practice is the wonderful Dr. Gholnecsar Muhammad. You might know her as Gholdy. Dr. Muhammad is an associate professor of curriculum and instruction at the University of Illinois, Chicago. She is the author of the essential 2020 book, Cultivating Genius, an Equity Framework for Culturally and Historically Responsive Literacy, in the 2023 book, Unearthing Joy, a guide to culturally and historically responsive curriculum and instruction. You've written two really important books, Gholdy. One is the framework, and the other is a practical application. Your most recent book, Unearthing Joy, is not only linguistically beautiful, but also visually stunning. I just could not stop looking at it. Your approach, the layers of songs and the intentional pauses to reflect through discussion and coloring, allows anyone to thoughtfully engage with your work. So first, I just want to say thank you and welcome.
Thank you. It's such a joy to be with you again and to be able to talk about this work together.
And speaking of work, you really acknowledge a lot of great authors and poets in your book, Unearthing Joy. And one of them was Langston Hughes. And one of the poems that really stood out to me was Freedom. So if you don't mind, I just want to say it for our listeners. And then I just want to get your reaction. And I really want to understand why you included it and why that was important. So Freedom by Langston Hughes. Freedom will not come today, this year, nor ever through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want my freedom just as you.
Oh, every time I hear it, thanks for resharing that. And every time I hear it, it's just so powerful. And it has meaning for so many different eras that we've lived in, that we've read about, that our current state today as well. Well, first of all, I feel that poets and artists have a way of helping us to conceptualize and understand very complicated and complex topics like freedom. Freedom is something that is very multi-layered, very complex, and it can be misunderstood. And I feel like we could read about freedom in academic journals and books all day long, but sometimes it's the artists, it's the poets that really help us to hone in on it in a clear, concise, meaningful way. And so I wanted this book to send the message that artists can help guide us, to teach us. Poetry can teach us pedagogy. Poetry can teach us ideology. You know, I follow the poetic musings of Langston Hughes. I always have throughout my life. And he has such a wealth and a collection of writings that helps us to understand and navigate different walks of life in different moments. And so that was the reason why I included this poem on freedom. You can't really understand joy unless you understand freedom, the need for it, the desire for it, the history of it. You can't really understand joy unless you really and truly understand liberation. Again, the need for it, the history of it. And when I hear you read that poem again, the one line that really stands out is, I don't need my freedom when I'm dead. You know, and that's a powerful line. Like, we are in a moment right now where we're seeing countless innocent people and innocent children being murdered.
Yeah.
And everything he says speaks to that. The part about land, the part about liberation, the part about not needing my freedom when I'm no longer here. I need it now. The urgency of it. And when I relate that to education, it's that same urgency. We don't need better textbooks when the children are no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need better standards, assessments, pedagogical methods like 20 years, 30, 40 years from now. We need it now.
Yeah.
And, I was trying to really speak to that urgency, that necessity of his words as it relates to freedom in society and, of course, freedom.
It's the urgency that really is like very top of mind for me. And because, like you said, students don't have time to wait to be free. And I'm just relating their freedom also to like the privilege of feeling free and the privilege then of being able to access joy. And then also thinking about then how maybe we shouldn't be satisfied with progress, but we should really be focusing on transformation. And so if education is truly transformed in a space that allows students to freedom dream, to a space where they feel like they can walk in that joy, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, to fully walk in joy, you're talking about such a systemic transformation of our society, of our system.
Mm-hmm.
Because while we can transform schools on a individual school level
Mm-hmm.
and make like massive changes, we still know our children leave that building within the same society, right? We know that our teachers leave that building navigating the same society. And so much of that transformation, I believe, has to happen at a societal, systemic level.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, we're going to do social justice work here and there, but it won't be as sustainable and meaningful and impactful unless we have like the wider system changing, as we know that society is often a reflection of our schools, or schools
Mm-hmm.
reflect society, right? And then we need to make sure that the adults, the people who are allowed within that educational space, they are ready and prepared in terms of their hearts. The condition of their hearts have to be a certain way in order to teach them and lead them and interact with them.
Yeah.
So this idea of like, what is the condition of one's heart needs to be sort of assessed before they're hired. And we have to make sure that in terms of ideology, that these educators, right, understand anti-racism, they implement and lead and teach with anti-oppression, identity, and all these things. Because if not, we're putting harm in front of our children. And then we also know for students to be able to walk about the school, enjoy, it is the whole environment. It's the climate. It's what's on the walls. It's the energy of the space.
Mm-hmm.
It is the pedagogy that elicits joy and justice, where children can see themselves, not just in the adults, but they should be able to see themselves in the curriculum that they learn. It is sort of the freedom to dream, like being in a space where I am not afraid, where I feel safe, where I don't feel like if I look or talk this way, these ideas, they're going to be shunned. I'm going to get fired if I talk about racism or white supremacy. Or as a student, I can't freely share my ideas around the world. I'm going to be punished, suspended. That is what joy, when we eliminate that kind of space that's not free and not feeling safe, joy can enter. Joy cannot enter when you have feelings of being unsafe. And we can look at what's happening in the world right now. We say that students should have a voice, students should speak up, students should fight for a better world, and we will not stifle their voices. But the moment they protest against
Mhm.
genocide, for divestment and all these things, they're punished. They're punished for having a voice, for making the world a better place, for speaking up. All the things that the universities and the institutions say that this is the kind of student we want to produce. And when they show up that way, immediately they're punished, they're arrested, they're kicked out of school, and all these things. So, if we're really being honest about joy, we have to be honest about anti oppression
Mm.
and safety and wellness and healing, and sort of creating spaces from who we hire, the energy of the space, the spirit of the space that really honors these ideals. And then we'll see it honored, hopefully, right in the curriculum and the assessments and the policies and the books that we tell children that they have to read. Everything
Yeah.
from the learning experience needs to promote these ideas of joy.
Yeah. I just want to pause for when you said, what is the condition of one's heart? Like,
Mhm.
that's our next podcast where we'll dig into that, because that is so important to really understand and to really discuss. But I also, as you were talking, just really thinking about what does joy look like, and you know it when you see it. And I know that you're very familiar with Art in Motion in Chicago and Kira May. I really want to amplify that work, because that is joy really exhibited every single day as soon as you walk into the space. And so you know when there has been an intentional culture created, like you said, from the adults to the students, and you know what that feels like. But when you say that it also has to be folded back into the curriculum, one of the quotes from your books was, how would my instruction build student skills for the content area, encourage them to experience joy in their reading, writing, listening, and speaking? How then can an educator intentionally build joy into their curriculum if it is not systemically built in for them?
Well, they have to, it's the same, the answer to this question is the same way a teacher will take a text, an idea, a theme, a topic, and intentionally add an objective for skills, a standard. So let's say a teacher just has a book in front of them,
Mhm,
and I'm asking the teacher, how would you intentionally put in skills in this?
mhm,
Teachers might automatically say, okay, students will learn how to cite textual evidence.
mhm,
Instantly, they'll learn how to comprehend that their mind will go to skills. And I'm really asking teachers to do the same thing for joy.
mhm,
You take that same curriculum, that same textbook, that same book or text, and you just say, how will this learning experience, whether the unit plan is 1 week or 6 weeks, how will this learning experience help to elevate my students' understanding of beauty within themselves, the world around them, or wellness, healing, laughter, wonder, happiness, benefits in the world, what's good in the world. You can go on and on. What I'm doing, I'm really just reading definitions of joy.
mhm,
And you should be able to answer that. And when you teach joy, right, with the other pursuits, it becomes quite easy. If you're
mhm,
just saying, well, how can I bring joy in this? And you did not think about identity, skills, intellect, or criticality. So joy also comes in the materials we teach with. What are the joy? What are the texts that elicit joy? What are the methods? What
mhm,
are students doing in collaboration in small groups with the community? What are the methods to incite joy, right?
right,
And then, it also comes in the environment. As soon as they walk in, have you created a simulated joyful like classroom experience? As soon as they walk in, who's on the walls? Is it clean? Is it colorful? Does it feel like a space of safety? That's what the environment in classrooms should look and feel like.
not just sometimes, every day.
Yeah, every day. Why do we wait to the end of the year for all the joyful things?
Right.
And it's partly because teachers just feel such a constraint and a pressure to teach toward the test. throughout
Mhm.
the school year, that they feel like once the test is over, now real learning can happen or real joy can happen. And it's so backwards when we think like that.
So as you think of all of these components and joy, what promise should we, as the adults, as the educators and ed leaders, ultimately be making to students?
We should be promising to practice the same pursuits we're teaching.
Mhm.
The schools, the institutions, the policies, the assessments, the curriculum is always going to be better when you have major political forces that are fighting to eliminate, justice and joy in the
Right.
curriculum.
Yeah.
But when we think about the teacher metaphorically as the one who's providing the water to the growth of the children, there are things that we indeed can promise that's within our wellhouse or our control. And one of those is promising to teach the five pursuits. I promise to help you understand yourself, identity, to teach the standards through skills, to teach you new knowledge set into action, which is intellect, to teach you about joy in the world, and to teach you about justice in the world, right? We can make that promise, and then we can promise to embody and live out those same pursuits in our own lives and do our self work. We can promise that when the assessments, when the curriculum, when the standards are not enough, that we will adapt them and make them better. We can promise to put beautiful, wonderful intellectual learning experiences in front of children, the best books. We can
Mhm.
promise to be the brightest and the most conscious and best in front of them because they deserve the best teacher. And we can promise to do the self work to make ourselves the brightest and the best to put in front of them. I used to teach children like every summer, and I wanted them to know that it's not just anybody. Like, I am doing the work. This is my background. This is what I spend my life's work doing. I read, I try to work every day to make my pedagogy better for you, my curriculum better. So that's the kind of teacher they deserve.
Did you know over 40 million American adults are functionally illiterate and unable to read above a fifth grade level? Children from low income families may hear 30 million fewer words than their more affluent peers. Empower your teaching journey with curriculum aligned resources from Mrs. Wordsmith. Crafted by a team of experts and backed by the science of reading, spanning education, linguistics, gaming, and entertainment, Mrs. Wordsmith's dynamic educational materials inspire students to develop a genuine love for reading and language. Get ready to revolutionize your classroom and witness the transformation in how your students learn. Close the opportunity gap by engaging kids in evidence-based, joyful, and silly experiences to activate new skills and inspire persistence. Visit mrswordsmith.com to get started.
One of my favorite lines from your book, from Unearthing Joy, is I like to believe that we often become our names. Your name, Gholnecsar, means sharing flowers. So beautiful. One of the first recognizable moments of joy for a child is when they learn their name, and one of the first points of pain. I think that was something you said, especially in the Black and brown community, is when people don't take the time to get it right, because we know how that feels. How does this very early educational experience diminish joy, and what is the academic impact?
Sometimes the impact of how people dismiss our names is
Yeah.
not felt or understood or articulated until we're much older.
Yeah.
I know it didn't feel good as a child, but the older I got, I was able to understand it, articulate it, and put some more words to it, right?
Mhm.
And you have a lot of tradition, even in our last names. There's a whole history around it, especially African Americans in the United States, right? Our families, our people, they pick our names somehow, given whatever's happening in the state of the world or our lives. That is culture, that's tradition. And so it carries so much beautiful meaning. And to dismiss a child's name, how are you then going to teach them in culturally responsive ways? And that's sort of like the first step. And how are you going to teach identity if you dismiss their names?
Yeah.
How are you going to do any of this work?
Yeah.
I was reading a picture book. I always read picture books and write lesson plans and things like that. So I was reading a picture book yesterday, and it's about this white family who travels to Vietnam to adopt a new child, then changes her name to Rebecca.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, I don't like this.
Mhm.
I don't like that not enough honor was given to this child's birth name. We do not know why the parents had to give this child up. It just felt like such a dismissal and ownership over this child. So I'm always curious because that's a way of getting to know our children. And if
Yeah.
you do not know them, you cannot teach them.
Yeah, totally agree. And, I'm glad you articulated it the way that you did, because some might be wondering, like, why are they talking about names? But the way that you explained it, just like the importance of cementing their identity, of making them feel seen, is the first step of getting that right, and not being dismissive of all of the culture that's happening, so that they can step into their joy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal. That's the continuous striving. And it's certainly been enough scholarship, a lot of scholarship to guide us
Yeah.
toward name stories and honoring. There's even been research studies about how people have been discriminated based
Mhm.
on their names. So it's like, what further evidence, do we need?
Another thing you reference in your book is around the HRL framework. Can you share what that is and how that relates to this conversation?
Yeah. So in Cultivating Genius, the framework around my historical research around Black literary societies, Black newspapers, I came to basically 5 major goals that Black
Mhm.
people had in these spaces. And I named it as historically responsive because it's responding to history in this beautiful guide as a beautiful roadmap to what we need to do in schools today. And I honor it within the framework and within the researchers who have done culturally relevant and culturally responsive education. Folks like Lori Lassing Billings, Geneva
Mhm.
Gay, and Django Paris, and others. And because it honors those same beliefs, it builds upon those same beliefs. So, historically responsive literacy or education was the teaching of identity, helping children to know who they are, whose they are,
Mhm.
who they desire to be, teaching about diverse cultures in the world. The second goal that they had was the skills goal, right? Teaching the proficiencies, the competencies needed by different grade, what we call now grade levels, but also by different disciplines like math and science and ELA, seeing all disciplines as the humanities and not just ELA and social studies. The third is teaching intellectualism, teaching new knowledge set into action, teaching about new people, places, things, histories, making sure that when students leave that lesson plan, they're just not learning how to solve for X. They're learning the context of how to use that skill in the state of the world. That's what intellect gives. And then number 4 is criticality. That's teaching students how to name, understand, disrupt any form of oppression in the world,
Mhm.
in yourself, in the environment. So that can be teaching about pollution, littering, self-doubt. It could be teaching about genocide, gentrification, anti-racism, anti-homophobia, religious discrimination, Islamophobia, and you name it, anything that elicits harm. And then joy, right? Which I talk more about in the second book, but joy again is being able to recognize, understand beauty, wonder, imagination, all these things.
So, I'm going to reference your Stevie Wonder reference in your book, but in all of the things that you said,
Mhm.
what needs to change so that students can move into a new way that's waiting to be born?
Yeah. So, and those lyrics again are like another example how an artist can help us understand humanity and education better.
Yeah.
And that song was written by a Black woman. I think we need policies for culturally responsive pedagogies.
Mhm.
See, without policy and without this mandate to teach it. Some people are going to create mandates to not be able to teach it, which we see right now.
Yes.
Without mandates to teach it, some people are going to teach in this way and some people won't because they don't have to. There's no policy that says I have to. We need it explicitly in the teacher evaluation.
Yeah.
Well, most Black and brown school districts, like New York City schools and Chicago public schools, they use the Charlotte Danielson framework. Why? That's like my only question to them. Why? You're using a framework that was written by a white woman who said that this is not for equity, for culturally responsiveness, and you use it in districts that have 85, 89% Black and brown children. She's telling you, you can read the work. There's nothing about culturally responsive education there. And some people say, well, if you dig and pull out this word and go, teachers should not have to imply. It should be explicit. It should be literal. So we would need a different teacher evaluation connected to that policy.
Yeah.
Then we need, what I am pushing for are standards and pursuits to be taught. The standards are skills only right now. But what if we had wider standards around joy or pursuits around joy, around criticality, around identity, around intellect? We can create language around that. And then the hope is the assessments will match the pursuits and standards. Because if the standards are only skills, I'm only going to assess skills. So I would love to see at state, district, and school levels, assessments for joy, assessments for identity, for criticality, for intellect. We will gather information through assessments on what we value. And so the fact that since the inception of these very racist standardized tests, if you study the history of them, we've only assessed skills. And some of those skills have been problematic and not connected or aligned to the history of Black and brown people and our skills. So what I'm saying all this to say is that when the standards change, the assessments will change. And then, of course, I'm going to speak to a change in these publishing companies that produce textbooks and core curriculum need to do better, period. It's time for us to move beyond skill development. Stop being scared and afraid. Stop picking capitalism over humanity and do the work. It takes action. I mean, we have the resources, we have the genius, we have the people to create it. What else do you need?
Well, folks, you heard it here first. In a month, we can change all of this.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's not by chance that, I was just speaking on we're at 70 years since Brown versus Board of Education. It's not by chance. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe nothing has changed since Brown. I can't believe nothing has really changed since the 60s. If you look at Sewanee University, University of the South in Tennessee, in their founding documents, it says, we are creating this university with the explicit purpose to produce human beings who will go out and vote to continue slavery. So we must not be like, people have been doing this and they've been creating institutions to keep it going. So it's not just to have us in leadership positions.
Right.
And that's the disheartening part for me. It doesn't mean I lose all hope because I see the work. I see teachers and principals doing this despite of society and the system. And that gives me the hope. Just sometimes dream that, it's 2024, it's going to be 2025. I dream that we would be in a much bigger space, like of getting this everywhere and not just in pockets of places.
And I think that goes back to the progress versus transformation. And you've shared lots of great information for us to consider and to continue to dig into and to learn for ourselves. You've also shared like a really strong framework on how to implement joy, not in a silo, but how truly it needs to be like interdisciplinary within the classrooms and the different systems. And one of the things you said as we close out our conversation, joy is about beauty and wonder. So I'm wondering with you, Gholdy, What was the last beautiful thing you noticed? Or what was the last thing that truly made you wonder?
Kara's books store, they posted in Atlanta, they posted something like what happens when a flower grows unexpectedly. And like the next month I saw in my plants, like these flowers just growing unexpectedly, like these sunflowers. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know they were there. Joy is all around us, and we have to be open enough. Our hearts have to be open enough to recognize it, see it, name it, experience it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the conversation. Sometimes we don't go the layer underneath to get to the space where students can even get to that more academic space as we think about identity and joy. And so really appreciate you sharing and having a conversation around this and reminding us that joy and wonder are everywhere, and it is necessary that we continue to find it. So thank you, Gholdy.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for being a part of my joy too, sis.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? Send your recommendations to me, Mason at gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.